Let's talk about how property assessment and taxation works in the city of Cold Lake. The city supplies services like roads, fire protection, snow removal, recreation, and parks. Each fall, City Council approves a budget to pay for these services. Usually, about 40% of the money comes from property taxes, which are collected from property owners in the city of Cold Lake. But how much tax does each property owner pay? Let's look at an example. Imagine there are just 3 houses in Cold Lake. Each property is different and has a different value. The blue house has a market value of $250,000. The red house is valued at $500,000, and the green house has a value of $750,000. But how are those values determined? The city contracts an independent professional assessor who uses established standards to determine market values for each property. Assessment of residential property is based on land value plus the value of any improvements on the land. The public lands map on our city website shows the assessed value of properties in the community. Suppose the city needs to collect $2,000 in taxes to cover the cost of providing services to our 3 homes. To calculate the tax rate, we divide the cost of the services by the total assessed value of all properties. Let's recap what we've covered so far. 1. The city provides services and determines the amount of taxes needed to pay for those services. 2. Assessment places a market value on each property in the city. And 3. The combined assessed value of all properties and the cost of providing services are used to calculate the tax rate. To determine how much tax each home pays, we multiply the tax rate by the assessed value. In this example, the blue house would pay $333, the red home would pay $667, and the green home would pay $1,000. Now, suppose a year has gone by and all property values have increased by 5%. The cost of providing services has remained the same at $2,000. Remember, the tax rate is the cost of services divided by the total assessment. The result here is that property owners still pay the same taxes as before, because the cost of services has not changed. This is also true if property values decrease by the same amount and the cost of providing services stays the same. Let's review. Taxes are calculated based on the assessment of the property multiplied by the tax rate. An assessment increase does not necessarily mean a higher tax bill. If all property values increase equally, everyone pays the same, as long as the cost of services also stays the same. Now, let's imagine another year has passed, but this time the assessed values of our 3 homes did not increase at the same rate. The blue home's assessment remained the same at $250,000, but the red house increased by 5% to $525,000, and the green home increased by 2% to $765,000. The cost of services held steady at $2,000, so that divided by the new assessment total equals the new tax rate. In this case, the blue house and the green house will pay less tax, and the red house will pay a higher proportionate share because of its larger increase in assessed value. Whenever assessed values don't increase at the same pace, there's a redistribution of the tax. However, the total tax collected remains the same. So, what happens when a new home is built in the community? This is called assessment growth. If the yellow house is assessed at $400,000 and the total tax required remains $2,000, the tax rate will be lower because there are now more properties splitting the cost of services. New development in the city results in each house paying less tax, provided the total tax required stays the same. Let's recap. Redistribution of the tax occurs when property assessments increase at different paces. When new properties are built in the city, there's a redistribution of taxes since there are now more taxpayers contributing to the tax base. This is called assessment growth. So far in our example, the cost of providing services has stayed the same. But what happens when costs increase, or when residents want new or expanded services? Suppose services now cost $2,500 instead of $2,000. The result is a new tax rate, which leads to a tax increase. The number of homes contributing to the tax base is the same, but each now pays a larger share to cover the increased cost of the services. These values are a hypothetical example to show how the process works, but the key points remain the same. 1. Taxes are based on the cost of providing services that residents want and need. 2. Total assessment value and the cost of services are used to calculate tax rates. And 3. An increase in property value does not always mean an increase in taxes. Hopefully that answers some questions about how assessment and taxation works. You can see the most recent tax rate and learn more about assessments on our website at coltlake.com/tax.